to talk about the labor market for a little bit. I've got a daughter who's graduating from college in next spring. Real curious to see what kind of prospects she's looking at. I know that there's been one of the unusual traits of the labor market in the last couple of months is being a big jump in labor productivity. You know, for a while, I know many economists were worried about the lack of growing productivity, labor productivity in the labor markets, and what that would do for growth. And now we've just seen this big jump in the last 2 quarters. The last one in particular, third quarter, was revised up from 4.7 to 5.2%. You know, holy cow. So what is your outlook for the labor market, and specifically, what does labor productivity do in terms of the outlook for jobs? And I know you said earlier, you know, a more productive workforce means greater opportunities for growth. But then if everybody's being super productive, maybe companies, you know, don't need as many people to do the work. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about the labor market and what's happening with productivity and the outlook for jobs.
A great question. And you know, I haven't looked at the numbers for the last quarter, but I looked at the numbers, productivity numbers prior to that over the last couple of years since COVID. And as we came out of COVID, the productivity numbers tanked and they're very low. And that was a concern. Then 2 quarters ago they came back. I guess last quarter they came back because they also rebounded. And my sense is that, you know, if you look at the trend, it's kind of returned to trend. And so I don't know that there's a big concern that productivity, when you look at it relative to trend, is kind of where it probably ought to be. The broader question that you raise is a great question. Is higher productivity good or bad, if you will, or is too much, if productivity grows too quickly, is that unhealthy for the economy? And I suppose one could say that if you have a very rapid rise in productivity, it might create some dissonance in labor markets. But I would take a step back and say probably the rise in living standards is probably more closely tied to technological change and productivity growth than anything else. And so, the idea that we want the next generation to be better off than the current generation is probably tied to technology and technological change and productivity growth more than anything else. And so I would say, when you take a step back, it's probably a good thing. We don't have a lot of telephone operators anymore. We don't use wooden plows. People have to retool. That's not to say that as in a dynamic economy, which requires where there's constant change, right? We've all learned that change is a constant thing, but change can be hard, and disruption can be hard, and it does cause people to perhaps retool, to be very flexible, and adapt to the changing work environment. And state the obvious that the pace of change, rate of change, is much faster now than it was 10 years ago, much faster now than it was 20 years ago and 30 years ago. It's accelerating at a rapid rate. AI is going to be a significant contributor to that rate of acceleration. We don't know what the future will behold, but hopefully it's an opportunity, and will contribute to a faster rise in living standards, which is generally good for everyone.